G'day guys, how you doing? I'm doing another live stream hobby session. I've got a whole ton of legionaries that I need to get painted for an upcoming event, and it's a big grind, it's a long process, and I find that I'm way more productive if I have something that can take my attention and sort of distribute it without requiring a lot of visual interactivity. So it's hard to do this whilst watching a movie or whatever, but I find that if I'm able to read the odd comment in here and then have a conversation with you guys whilst painting, gives it a little bit of a hobby session with your mates kind of feel, which really helps me get through these big grinds where I'm trying to paint 100 legionaries in one sitting. So thought I'd just jump on, have a live chat. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer or any topics you'd like to hear my thoughts on, chuck them in the comments and I will do my best to address them all. If you want to make sure that your comment stands out and that it gets the extra attention, chuck it as a super chat. You can chuck even just $1. That'll highlight it on the screen and that'll allow me to see it better and make sure that I am addressing those particular questions that you guys would like to see answered. Yeah, so with that being said, I'm going to get stuck straight into painting these legionaries and just start having a bit of a chat. And yeah, every couple of minutes or so, I'll check the chat, see if there's any topics in there that you guys would like to see discussed. And yeah, that's basically the format of this video. It's also worth saying at this stage that this is one of my earlier live streams. So if there's any technical issues, please make sure you let me know in the chat. Things like if the microphone drops out or if the audio is not right or if something happens weird with the video. I'm still sort of finding my feet when it comes to this sort of technology stuff. It is definitely not my skill set setting this stuff up and trying to work on these programs and make them all work. So if there's any challenges whatsoever pop up, please make sure you let me know. Cool. I've got here, someone has jumped in and just asked what time it is right now. Here in Melbourne, it is 8:45 p.m. So I've just finished up dinner and basically I've got an hour or so of free time before I need to hit the hay. So I thought I'd get some hobby done. And what I've got on tomorrow, which is worth sort of discussing, is the very last tournament for the Nephilim mission pack. So we're moving into the Arcs of Omen season here in Melbourne. So that pretty much kicks off straight away. Yeah, so basically tomorrow I've got the Risky Rollers putting on a really good event called the Heretics, something Heretics, I can't remember already. But yeah, basically it's going to be the last hurrah for Nephilim. So I'm looking to get the Black Legion, give them their last hurrah before I hang up the Black Legion in favor for some kind of new, exciting Arcs of Omen source. So there's a few different things happening with Arcs of Omen, which is really interesting, and so I'm sort of taking this as an opportunity to try out a different Legion. So I've had some pretty good success with the Black Legion, and I've had a lot of fun with the Black Legion. But I've been sort of thinking, part of when I set out to do this channel and sort of stepping up the content, part of what I planned to do was a different Legion for every event, and then I started playing the Black Legion and they were doing so well, I was crushing with them, that it was sort of hard to justify switching to a different faction because I was doing so well. It's like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I sort of stayed with the Black Legion for a while there, but now I'm sort of like, well, that Black Legion list doesn't work anymore, so I have to change something. And basically, whenever change is forced upon me, one of my ways of sort of embracing the change and dealing with the change is to just tackle it head on and just go, cool, if I have to change anything, I might as well use this as an opportunity to change lots of things and then just sort of put the feelers out there and see what this new emerging meta is going to look like, see what it's going to feel like, what sort of lists do I think can work, and sort of play around with some different stuff. So that's sort of where I'm at. So tomorrow at the Risky Rollers RTT, I will be giving the same Black Legion list that I ran at Mensa Masquerade a run and sort of just having a look, seeing, giving it the proper send-off. I'm currently undefeated with that list. I won the Mensa Masquerade and I won the Risky Rollers annual charity event. So I'm very happy with the list and that it is obviously is performing exceptionally well. But unfortunately, it went up almost 100 points and that list was so tight for points that the only way I was going to be able to bring it back down to below the 2,000 point mark was to drop an entire unit. And I just feel that if I drop that entire unit, it's entirely possible that that list just doesn't work. You know, almost every game that I played with it, I felt like I needed every one of those units. So trying to, you know, make that list work was proving quite difficult, and I think that the best way to approach that is to just go, here's an opportunity to embrace change and try a completely different legion. You know, so I'm thinking it's probably going to be, because the thing with this new Arcs of Omen, you know, mission release, his legionaries got really good, right? Legionaries, in my opinion, they were already on the cusp of good. You know, I was already taking them in my competitive lists as they were. And they just gained, like, if you take a unit of 5, they just gained, like, from a 90-point unit, gained 45 points worth of war gear, which is fucking crazy. That's like, you know, almost a 50% decrease in their points cost, if you think of it that way, because you're getting 50% of their points just becomes free war gear. So Legionaries got a huge glow up. Not to mention there's a bunch of the secondaries where if you do various things with a troops or an objective secured unit, you generate additional command points. So having an army that's heavily themed around those units is going to be very, very good, because you're going to be able to go, cool, every single turn I'm, you know, killing more units than you, and I'm doing it with troops. Or every single turn I am, you know, you name the objective, but you're doing it with troops, because the vast majority of your list is themed around troops. And I just think that that's a really interesting sort of dynamic. So having a troop-heavy list is going to be quite interesting. And I also think with the loss of Armor of Contempt, investing in those big durable units is less attractive. And also I find that if you're investing points in damage output, it's probably a waste, because your durability just dropped to the point where people are going to kill you before you can bring that damage to bear. So that's why I'm sort of heading more into that MSU cheap infantry sort of spam kind of lists. But this is where it gets interesting, right? So if you go, cool, I'm going to take a whole ton of squads of 5 legionaries. I think it's actually really hard to decide what legion does that the best, because word bearers do it really well because they get reroll hits and they have some access to some really interesting stratagems. They also get the 5-up feel no pain against mortal wounds, which is one of the things that, you know, deals with Marines quite well. And I also think with people bringing like Thunderhammer, Storm Shield, Terminators en masse, which is one of the things that I expect to see in the meta, like, I think with that, all of that considered, mortal wounds are going to be really premium, in which case having that inbuilt protection against mortal wounds is really good meta call. It's going to allow you to slide in quite well and remain somewhat protected. So word bearers are very, very good. They also have a really good secondary, which every one of your legionary units gets a free icon. So being able to do that action with the secondary, you know, that's one of the things Chaos Space Marines have historically quite struggled with quite a lot. So being able to go, cool, I'm just going to go in there, I'm going to do this action, and I'm going to score, you know, 15 points over the course of the game, and there's not a massive amount my opponent can do about it. I think that's a really strong, you know, strong move. So word bearers, very, very strong. They come out of Arcs of Omen with strong legionaries. Then on top of that, you've got Creations of Bile. They have really strong legionaries because they get the +1 strength and movement. So the +1 strength, that pairs really well with the chainswords, because now those chainswords, if you get them as Mark of Khorne, they go into strength 6 AP2, which is really, really good into the Marine meta, because now this unit of 5 legionaries with chainswords, it actually kills a shitload of Marines, like way more than any other legion. So that makes the Creations of Bile quite interesting. And further to that, their fight on death on a 4+, a lot of people are acting like it's this massive nerf, but it's kind of not that bad when you think about it, because your opponent still has to plan around you fighting on death. So they still have to assume you're going to. So they can't just throw a unit of 5 rangers into your, you know, legionaries or Rangers is probably a bad example. Let's say you like Banshees, right? Howling Banshees. They can't just throw them in and go, cool, we're going to make your legionaries fight last and then kill them. Because it only takes a couple of those strength 6 AP2 legionaries fighting back to kill those fucking Banshees. So, they sort of have to assume, okay, worst case scenario, he gets like 3 or 4 of them fight back. And guess what? That's probably still enough. So that's effectively the same as fighting back with the full squad, even if you only get 3 out of the 5. So I think Creations of Bile are also really good. And then further to that, they got their secondary is really, really good. All you have to do is kill things in melee, which these legionaries do really well with the power fist in the unit and the big chain axe thing. So those legionaries do really well in Creations of Bile. They do the secondary really well. And that secondary also got a bit of a buff because now that we're going to see a lot more Marines, you gain an additional victory point if you kill any Astartes models with Creations of Bile models. So the Creations of Bile become a little bit more relevant in the meta. So that's one other legion that I could take. And they also have access to Advance and Charge, which is a pretty good stratagem for them. Especially on these legionaries. Like if you're inside a Rhino and you go, cool, I'm going to disembark 3, then I'm going to move 6 plus D6 for an advance. So hypothetically, let's say you roll a 6, where you've just moved out 15 inches and then charge, which is actually pretty good. It's not going to get you turn 1 charges, necessarily, but it is still going to get you across the table fast and with hard-hitting units. So yeah, I definitely think there's an argument to be made for Creations of Bile being the best way to run Legionnaires. Then you've got Alpha Legion. They're also really good because their secondary is absolutely bonkers. It's not particularly special for Legionaries, but they're basically their secondary, for those who aren't familiar, is in the movement phase they can start an action, it finishes at the end of your turn. So there's nothing your opponent can do really to stop you. And basically, if you hold an objective marker, you flip it. As long as your unit is entirely within 6 inches of the enemy deployment zone. So you can do it with like Warp Talons or Raptors in the first turn because they can get a 12-inch pre-game move, and then in your first turn they then move a further 12. So turn 1 you can use it with your fast attack unit and go and get within 6 inches of their deployment zone whilst holding one of the objectives, and then basically on a 4-up your opponent can never score that objective marker again, that's game winning. Like if you do that turn 1, you've won the game. It's going to be very, very hard. If you're playing a 5 objective game and all of a sudden you can score points off all 5, but they can only score points off of 4 of them, it's going to be very easy for you to get hold more every turn. It's going to be very hard for them to even hold 2, because then all you need to do is shift the fight onto the 4 objectives that they have the ability to control. And if you can deny them 2 of them by just applying a shit tons of units, you're going to stop them. And basically then what you do is you go, cool, well, if I want to apply shit tons of pressure and shit tons of units, well, then a whole bunch of MSU legionaries seems like the way to go. So that's where Alpha Legion come into it. And Alpha Legion also have some really nifty tricks with their legionaries. Like they can, for a CP, put them back into strategic reserves, which means you start with like almost half of them in strategic reserves because you don't want to foot slog 100 Marines because they'll just get blown up. So you start with a bunch of them in strategic reserves, and then basically in your pretty much every turn you're going to be sending a CP to put one of them back into strategic reserves, bring a bunch on, and then you can basically cycle them through and just keep throwing legionaries at your opponent. And doing this means that you're able to continually apply that pressure throughout the course of the game, every single turn applying more and more pressure, and throwing objective secured models onto those objectives, which denies your opponent primary. So Alpha Legion are definitely playing a very strong primary game where they're just like, cool, we're going to use our abilities to make sure that you get 0 primary. And then it doesn't really matter if you score, just dropped my fucking brush, god damn it. It doesn't really matter if you score low because on your secondaries, because you're going to dominate the primary. But even then, it's not that big of a challenge for Alpha Legion to max out their secondaries because you're going to take this infiltrate and subvert, which is quite easy to score. You get 4 victory points every time you do it, and all you have to do is be within 6 inches of their deployment zone and do an action. That's really easy to do, especially when you've got guys coming on from outflank, because even from turn 2, you can't come on in their deployment zone, but you can come on within 6 inches of it. So basically you come on, do your action, 4 points. Next turn, come on, do an action, 4 points. Really, really easy to score high. And then it also pairs really, really well with behind enemy lines, which is from a different category, so you can take both of these objectives, and now you're getting victory points for being in your opponent's deployment zone and for being within 6 inches. And if you're in, that's also within 6. So basically you just go, cool, I'm going to drop an obliterator down, a single model obliterator, because that's really small footprint, really easy to deep strike. So you drop that in behind them, then a squad of legionaries comes on from the side, the legionaries do the action, and boom, that's 7 points straight out the gate. Or if the legionaries are able to charge or get into the opponent's deployment zone, that's 8 points per turn. And that's so easy to do, and your opponent's really going to struggle to do it. Yes, this Alpha Legion list doesn't do a massive amount of damage. Like it's a lot of legionaries, which are they're decent, but they're not killing knights, for example. They're going to struggle to chew through those heavy targets, but basically it's just going to win on victory points. It's not trying to hurt your opponent. It's going to hurt your opponent because you've got things like the Disco Lord and the Demon Prince, which are really powerful beat sticks. They'll kill some stuff. But yeah, so it's just all about scoring those victory points. So that's going to be really good. But then there's so many more options. Like on top of that, you got the Emperor's Children. Now, legionaries, you can run a bunch of them as Noise Marines if you want to, because a bolt pistol chainsword legionary is more or less the same thing as a bolt pistol chainsword noise marine. You know, they're pretty much the same thing. So a lot of these guys have been, you know, not these ones, but you know, you can run them as either. And also, just the regular legionaries, even if you do run them as legionaries, not noise marines, in an Emperor's Children list are really powerful. And a lot of people think they got nerfed because they Marcus Slanesh went up to 20 points. So now if you want to take a unit of legionaries with Marcus Slanesh, you're looking at a minimum of 110 points, whereas every other legion is only 105, right? Or every other Chaos God is only 105. But the thing is with the legionaries, you gained access to free power fists and free greater chain axes. And both of those things have a -1 to hit modifier, but Emperor's Children can ignore any and all hit modifiers. So now they're going in with an icon that's free, so they're going in and they're hitting on 2s with those big powerful weapons. So Emperor's Children, the legionaries in those armies actually just got really, really powerful. On top of that, if you put melter guns in the unit, you can advance and shoot because you're a assault weapon. So you can disembark out of your Rhino, advance, and then being Emperor's Children, you can use Honor the Prince to advance 6. So you're moving out, you know, your 15 inches, and there's nothing, you don't even need diced rolls to do it. So you move 15 inches, shoot something with your melter gun, and then you can use the excessive cruelty stratagem to make sure that you either guarantee a 6 to hit, which means you're going to get 2 hits if you're in any doctrine other than destruction. So you can go out and go, cool, this melter gun guy pops out and gets 2 hits on you, on your little character in the corner there or something like that. Or you can save it and use it to get damage results. And if you're within 6 inches of the target, that means you're going to be doing a minimum, like just a standard 8 damage. You hit them, you wound them, 8 damage. So this is really, really powerful. And basically the way that you would use this stratagem is you would save the CP, you would spend the CP at the start of the shooting phase, and you would roll to hit. If you successfully hit, you'd probably just keep it, but if you fail to hit, you'd change it into a 6. And then you'd roll to wound. If you successfully wound, you keep it. If you fail to wound, you'd change it to a 6. And then you'd roll your damage, and if you rolled anything, well, at that point, you just wouldn't even roll the damage because you haven't used it yet, so you have to use it at the end of that sequence, and then you basically just go, cool, here's 8 damage. And that's just crazy. That's just killing characters with a 90 or 110 point unit of legionaries that can just fly out of an unsuspecting Rhino. And because you have so many units of them, it can come from any angle. So it's going to be really hard for your opponent to protect themselves against this guy. So that's another legion that does this really, really well. And basically, almost all of them do it quite well in their own unique different way. So I'm sort of struggling to decide which one I want to take. I am leaning towards the Emperor's Children, just because they're going to do consistent melee damage, consistent shooting damage with that, like the meltgun strat and whatever. And then basically I'd be looking at taking a mix of legionaries and noise marines, and the noise marines would be more like Daka with their blast masters, that sort of thing, or a pod full of them that have sonic blasters as well. They would be my heavy damage dealers, and then the legionaries would be my scrappers, and they would be all about going around dealing damage and taking objectives and sort of multitasking. So that's sort of what I'm looking at. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think about which legion you think has the potential to be the best. So I'm just going to see, there's a few comments in here. Let's have a quick look at what we've got going on there. So it's 11 a.m. in Europe. This is my motivation to get off the couch and go hobby. That's beautiful. Let's do a hobby session together. So there's no real questions in there, so I'm just going to keep sort of ranting about what I'm sort of predicting for the future and what my sort of hopes and dreams are and what my plans are. I do think Arcs of Omen is ultimately, I think it's a good thing, because it's forcing us to have these conversations, right? It's forcing us to look at other things within our books, both Marines and Loyalists and Chaos Marines and everything. Everybody is looking back to their codex and going from start. They're like, okay, well, hang on. What units have I overlooked previously that are now good units and are worth taking? So I think that's almost always a positive thing for the game. That being said, I do think that GW have made, like, I wouldn't say an error. I think this was strategic and I think it was smart, but I don't think it was appropriate. And what I mean by that is that they sort of had the meta where we wanted it, right? Like, the win rate at tournaments for most factions was pretty freaking close to 50%. Arguably as close to 50% as you can ever realistically hope to get it. And that tells me that most factions in the game were relatively well balanced. Yes, there were some outliers, but the way that they were doing the rolling updates with minor changes to targeted specific stratagems or specific problems, that was a very effective way of dealing with it. And that meant that if your army was doing okay, you could pretty much reasonably expect that it would not change rapidly between each data slate. And I really liked that. Whereas this feels like to me what's happened is somebody's complained about Armor of Contempt. And by somebody I mean probably thousands and thousands of people have complained about Armor of Contempt. So as a result, GW is like, okay, well, we have to remove Armor of Contempt, but we can't remove it because the Marines are already scoring quite low at tournaments. So if we remove Armor of Contempt, we're going to kill the Marines. So then they've gone, well, now we need to overcompensate and give Marines a buff that's not only going to bring them up, but also counter the loss of Armor of Contempt. So they've had to, and that's why we've seen such insane, dramatic points reductions for Marines, because they had to do something, because they had to nerf Armor of Contempt because people were complaining about it. That's my current theory. And it's disappointing to see, because in my opinion, Armor of Contempt was amazing. It was such a good thing for the game. It was such a healthy thing for the game. And the reason I say that is because it adds diversity to the profiles of things. Like, a Marine with Armor of Contempt is better than like a Tau suit that has a 3-up save. They're both 3-up armor saves, but the Marine is slightly better. But the Marine is not quite as good as a Tau suit with a 2-up save, right? So now what you've done is you've effectively gone, instead of having 2-ups and 3-ups, we're going to have 2-ups with Armor of Contempt, then there's 2-ups, then there's 3-ups with Armor of Contempt, and then there's 3-ups. So you've created twice as many types of unit, which means that playing Marines feels different than playing anything else with a 3-up armor save. And that to me was just so amazing, and it was so smart. and it really did make the Marines have a unique and special feel, you know. And it also forced people to make decisions in the meta. Like you had to go, okay, well, am I going to take these AP1 weapons? Well, are there many Marines in the meta? If there are, maybe I won't. If the Marines are not prevalent in the meta, maybe I will. You know, or maybe you'll go, okay, cool. I am going to take a whole bunch of AP1 weapons because they're really, really good into the Necrons, the Orcs, the Eldar, you know, the Tyranids, all that sort of stuff. But then that makes me vulnerable to Marines. So I'm also going to bring in this other unit that's really good into Marines. And that way I've got something if I verse non-Marines, something if I verse Marines. It really does create a really diverse and interesting mechanic on the game. Whereas removing that, now it's like, cool, just go back to the old spam AP1 weapons. That's, you know, AP1 and 2 weapons, you just take a fuck ton of them because they're good into everything now, you know? So I just think that's really disappointing, and I really didn't, you know, I didn't agree with all the people complaining about Armor of Contempt. Yes, it was a little bit of a pain in the ass to calculate, you know, like when you go, okay, hang on, you're AP3, I have a 2-up armor save, but I have Armor of Contempt, so you become AP2, so that pushes me to a 4-up, but I'm also in cover, which means I go back to a 3-up, and it was like, it was a lot of, you know, I'll grant that it was a lot of math required to calculate those things, but realistically, it wasn't that hard, and I think it was well worth the rule, to be honest, because it just made Marines feel unique, and it forced you to make difficult decisions when list writing, and it was just way more interesting. Whereas the loss of Armor of Contempt, I think it's a huge blunder. But at the same time, I understand why GW have done it, right? Because if people are complaining about something, well, it's kind of their responsibility to give the customer what they want to a degree. The challenge I have with that is sometimes the customer doesn't know what they want. And I think a lot of the people that were complaining about Armor of Contempt are going to pretty rapidly realize that having Armor of Contempt in the game was way better and way more fun than having everybody just spam AP1 weapons, you know? So yeah, that's sort of my thoughts on the changes to Armor of Contempt and the, you know, the way that that's going to impact things. I think it's going to just be like, and I think that's part of why Harlequins got the nerf that they got as well, because if they're going to nerf Marines to the point where everyone's just going to be bringing AP1 weapons, well then all of a sudden an army that has 4-up invulnerable saves across the board is actually really, really good, because they don't care about your AP. They're just like, yep, cool, you know. So I think they sort of had to nerf Harlequins as well because of what they'd just done to Marines, because they caved into people complaining about Armor of Contempt. Whereas I think if GW just perhaps articulated themselves better and explained to people, look, this is why you want Armor of Contempt. This is not a decision that we made lightly. It's not a willy-nilly decision. You know, here is why Armor of Contempt is actually a good thing for the game. If they had done that, that would have been much more interesting. And they could have kept it, but it is what it is. All right, let's have just a quick look at the chat. Is there anything here? Emperor's Children is my favorite legion, so I'm picking them. I'm going to be using Black Legion and super keen to use legionaries. Alpha Legion does seem stronger. So, like, look at that. We've got multiple people in the chat here, which thank you very much for your contributions. But you've got multiple people in the chat here, all of which are essentially disagreeing on what the most powerful form of legionaries is. And that's so good. That's really healthy for the game. Like that shows that there's balance. That shows that there's a reason to at least consider each one of these legions. Like, I didn't touch on Black Legion before, but Black Legion also have potential to be a very, very strong legionary army because they have a stratagem that allows their legionaries to turn off your objective secured. And that is so strong. Being able to go, cool, your opponent goes, okay, you've got, what, 3 legionaries sitting on that objective there. I'm going to put 5 of my assault intercessors on there and take that objective from you. And then you can just go, cool, well, I'm actually going to just turn off your objective secured, so now it's back to me holding it again. And then you can do that on this objective, and then on another objective, you can be like, and I'm actually going to make those legionaries over there red corsairs this turn, so they now count as twice as many models, so I take that objective back as well. And all of a sudden your opponent thought that they were giving you a 0-point primary, when in fact you get a 12-point primary. And it's like, whoa, that just is a huge swing. Like your opponent, that's almost a game-winning swing in its own. If you do that once in a game and turn a 0-point primary into a 12-point primary, you've probably won the game. And Black Legion are one of the only armies essentially in the game that have the capacity to do that, because you need to be able to do it across multiple units. So yeah, Black Legion are definitely something worth considering. Whether or not the Black Legion archetype with the Terminators and all that is still alive, or whether or not it's something that's best going with the Legionaries, is another question, which I don't have the answer to at this stage. It could kind of go either way, because like the Terminators are still very hard to kill. The Terminators still do a lot of damage. They do really good damage into Marines because they got high AP. They got AP on their bolters. They can get reroll hits and wounds, which means that they're wounding on 4s, but it's with rerolls. It's really, really high value. You get a lot of value out of your reroll wounds there. So yeah, they get a lot of the Black Legion get a lot. They can also still take Abaddon. They're the only Legion that can, because every other Legion basically, and I've got a video coming out, I think tomorrow morning, on this topic, which is basically saying that that Black Legion are the only Legion that can take Abaddon the Despoiler now. He's effectively dead. And that's because there's a rule which is hidden in the Codex, and so it's very hard to find. But in the Chaos Space Marine Codex, it specifically says that you can't take models from 2 different legions in one detachment. And this is separate to the Agents of Chaos rules and all that sort of stuff. He basically says in a single detachment, you can't take more than 1 legion. And because Abaddon has the Black Legion keyword built into him that you can't change, that means you can't put him in the same detachment as any other legion. And that means that your Arcs of Omen detachment, if you're an Emperor's Children, for example, it can't include Abaddon. And the allied detachments, none of them are Chaos Space Marines. Like, you can't ally Chaos Space Marines with Chaos Space Marines. And as a result, you just literally can't have Abaddon in any legion except for the Black Legion, which is a huge fucking nerf to all these other legions, because there was tons of people who were bringing Emperor's Children and Abaddon. There was tons of people that were bringing, Red Corsairs and Abaddon. So losing that is a pretty big blow for a lot of Chaos Space Marine lists. Not to mention he went up 50 points on top, and I'm not entirely sure whether or not he was worth it. I often debated in my head whether he was even worth the 300. Like, I was like, okay, cool, 300 points. Yes, he's an amazing unit. He does a lot of work. But 300 points, that's a lot of stuff. Like, you can get a lot of toolbox pieces for 300 points. And you can get things that are really fast, that can jump like flies. You can get a unit of 10 Warp Talons, and it's like, cool. Well, it probably hits as hard, if not harder than Abaddon, into a variety of targets. It also is really hard to stop. Like, it can jump over you, it can jump over ruins, it can jump over enemy models, and it's just so fucking hard to stop. Also, you can't fall back from it if you fail to beat it in a roll-off, which Abaddon doesn't have. So it can go, cool, I'm going to kill this thing, and then I'm going to pile into and consolidate into that other thing. And now in your opponent's turn, when they go to fall back with that other thing, they have to roll off. If you beat them, they're stuck in combat with those Warp Talons, which means they can't shoot the Warp Talons. And it also likely means that they can't charge other things, because they might have been, White Scars, and they might have been planning to fall back and then charge something over there. Whereas you're just like, no, you're actually stuck in combat with those Warp Talons, so good luck. And you can basically, with a big squad of Warp Talons, you can tag multiple enemy units, which means they have to win multiple roll-offs, which is unlikely to happen. And as a result, you're really fucking with their game plan. Really, really fucking with it. But Abaddon can't do that. Abaddon can't really fuck with their game plan. At best, he's a bully who can basically tell them that, this objective marker over here is being controlled by him, and you have to dedicate serious resources if you want to take it off him. That was his sort of niche. Whereas now he just doesn't fill that niche, because you can only take him in Black Legion, and being that much more expensive, it's like, I don't know whether I'd rather him or a unit of Warp Talons and another unit. Like, there's tons of things you can do with those points. So Yeah, I don't know if Abaddon's really gonna survive this season, unfortunately. All right, let's just do a good catch up with the chat here. Uh, +1 to hit on the Black Legion with your heavy weapons is pretty good. That's true. You big units of bikes, the Mark of Zinch, put demon shells on it with Abby rerolls. That's a very, very good trick. So, for those who don't know, basically you put Mark of Zinch on them and you put an icon in the unit. And this is really good on bikers because they have a shit ton of bolt guns, so they get a lot of utility out of that icon combo. Whereas you could do the same thing with like Chosen, for example, but they have literally half as much DACA because every bike has the 2 bolt guns on it, whereas the Chosen they have 1 bolt gun. So as a result, it's way better on a unit of bikes. And when you get reroll hits and wounds with them, and then you can put vets on them for +1 to wound, and you can give them demon shells, which gives them a further +1 AP. So now you got AP2 bolters that against things like knights are going to be hitting on like 2s most likely because it'll be closest target with rerolls to hit. And if you're in the first 2 turns, you're going to get exploding 6s to hit as well. So you're going to get a massive amount of hits. And then if you're strength 4 with +1 to wound, so you'd be winning on 5s, and then you're getting full reroll to wound. And then you're pushing them through, even if they took the 2 up armor save, you'd be pushing them through to their 4 up, which is the same as if they rotate their shields. And if they don't have that, and they're just a 3 up armor save knight, you'd be pushing them to their 5 up. So they would actually have to spend a command point to rotate their ion shields to protect themselves against your bolters, which is just bonkers. It's so bonkers. So that unit puts out a ton of hurt. My concern, I guess, with that unit is that it does no damage in combat, right? Like almost nothing, because there's just strength 4 dorks with AP1. Like, it's just they don't have the special weapons, they don't have the power fists in the unit, the chain fists in the unit, that sort of stuff, and they also don't have the high AP from the accursed weapons. As a result, they kind of just don't do the heavy lifting, and your opponent just goes, okay, cool, you might get 1 turn of shooting me, but then I'm getting in combat with those bikes, and they're probably just going to kill them. And if you have them as Mark of Zinch, that also means you can't put Delightful Agonies on the unit, which means that unit is very, very squishy, and your opponent's probably just going to blow you up. They're probably just going to kill you before you even get an opportunity to really wield that unit to its full effect. And that's just kind of disappointing in my opinion. I think whereas the Terminators or even the Chosen for that matter, they can't just tag you and be like, cool, I'm in combat with you, my Sanguinary Guard are in combat with you, and I'm just going to stay here forever. Because you're like, well, my fucking Terminators are actually going to punch your dick off. So I highly recommend looking into the, whether or not the Terminators and the Chosen could be viable. Like, we never know. We won't know for a while because we're going to have to sort of wait and see. I think this meta is going to take a while to adjust, probably more so than other metas, just because of the sheer disruption that this update's caused. The sheer amount of changes. It's not as simple as just, oh, yeah, cool, a couple of units got cheaper. It's like, well, entire factions got fucked here. And the entire factions got changed in really weird ways as well. Like some of the changes to, for example, Tau, simple Tau, they got completely flipped on their head because one of the main things that they were doing previously, which was generating them a massive amount of victory points, was their bombers. Their bombers were really, really good and really, really annoying. But now they're trash because they used to be able to turn 1, just fly off the table and drop a bomb on the way out. Cool, so they bombed you turn 1, turn 2 they come back on, and then turn 3 they bomb you again. So that was fucked. Whereas now, they can't even be on the table turn 1. Then turn 2 they arrive from strategic reserves, so can't drop a bomb. And then turn 3 they can drop a bomb, but they can't fly off the table when doing so. So that basically means that they're going to drop 1 bomb and then you're going to be guaranteed able to shoot them. Whereas previously they could have dropped 2 bombs and still been protected the whole time. So that's a huge nerf to the bombers, which means that the Tau are going to play a very different game. They're going to have to start taking different units, and that's going to have its flow-on effects to the meta because then instead of taking the bombers, that means people can run castles again. Like they can run lots and lots of characters close by because they're not worried about bombers. So as a result, you've got the Death Star style meta comes back and people start running that. There's tons of different, I think the flow-on effects of these sorts of things are underestimated at best. And yeah, seeing the way that this is all going to sort of pan out, it's going to take a long time. We're not going to be able to just go, cool, within a month we'll have a pretty good idea of what the top tier faction is going to be and what the top tier lists are going to be. And then it's just a process of refining them from there. I don't think that's the case, or going to be the case. I think we're much more likely to see, each event for the next 6 months will have a completely different sort of spin on that top army. That's my thoughts. I could be wrong. We'll see. But yeah, that's my current sort of prediction on what we can expect to see. All right. I'm just going to take a quick ad break while I go refill my drink bottle. So just give us 2 seconds.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
Do your objective markers ever get lost behind terrain or other models and become difficult to see? Do they ever get bumped and accidentally moved during a game? And do they ever spark arguments about distances? Well, not anymore. Introducing the blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers. Made from the same material as astronaut suits, or maybe military equipment, or probably neither of those things, this 2mm thick neoprene synthetic rubber is tear resistant, water resistant, and is designed to last. But that's not all. The blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers come in a variety of different designs and styles to suit any faction represented in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These objective markers are a perfect gift for yourself or a friend and are a perfect way to flex and show your opponent that not only are you a smarter, cooler, and better 40k player than them, but you also have more disposable income than they do. For the low price of $25, you'll get not 1, not 2, but 6 neoprene objective markers perfectly designed for 9th edition Warhammer 40k. But wait, there's more. For a limited time only, people who sign up on Patreon to support Blog for the Blood God as a Skull Champion tier $5 per month member will gain access to a custom design service where I will design a unique logo to support their gaming club, like the one I did to the left here for the Potato Farmers local gaming club here in Melbourne. Follow the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today. Alrighty guys, welcome back. I hope that all worked. It's the first time that I've tried to put a break in the live stream, so let me know how that worked, if the audio was fine, if all that sort of shit was all good. That's something that it's not there in an attempt to advertise. It's more just to give you guys something to watch while I go refill my water, take a piss, that sort of stuff. Because these live streams, they make my mouth go quite dry with all this talking, because I'm largely just talking to myself, it sort of feels like, so need to make sure that I keep myself hydrated. So yeah, let me know how that worked. Yeah, so I don't know if there's any questions in here. If you have any questions that you want answered, do a super chat. I know it only costs $1, but it'll help me instead of scrolling through, a billion comments trying to find something. I can just sort of go, boom, there's a super chat. I'll talk about that for, for 15 minutes or whatever. Because I don't think it's very entertaining for you guys to sit there and watch me scroll through this thread of stream of consciousness in the YouTube comments. So if you do have anything in particular that you'd like to hear me discuss, please feel free to do that. I'll have a quick look here. I'm planning around creations of bile for my army, but I'm also looking to start a fallen angels counts as army, leaning towards playing them as Black Legion or Emperor's Children. So if I had to pick one legion to use their rules to represent a fallen angels army, it probably would be Black Legion. And the reason I say that is because the Black Legion are they're kind of vanilla in a lot of ways, but they also have a lot of marine-like behavior, I want to say. They have all the different chapters, they have all of the different, fall back and shoot, fall back and charge, those sorts of things. They have a wide array of abilities that don't feel as Chaos Space Marine-like as some of the other legions, they're not as much into here's my demon thing, or here's my, whatever. So I feel like if I was to try and use a loyalist-ish kind of looking faction, but I wanted to use Chaos Space Marine rules, I would be using Black Legion to represent them. So yeah, that's cool. We've got a super chat there. How do I... Alright. It looks like a super chat with no question attached to it. Here we go. From Lexi. Hey Dean, love your vids. I ran a 9 Black Rune Slanesh Bikes unit with the Mind Veil, Dark Apostle before. Might need to swap to the Zinch ones now. Supported by Master of Possession, Nurgle DP, Dark Apostle with Covert Control, 1 Dark Apostle Zinch for the 6-up Funa Pain, Black Mace, and Omen of Potency for DPS. Yeah, Omen of Potency and Flames of Spite makes for a very fucking spicy character. And so does the Black Mace, and so does Ulaka the Black. If you can, if you've got a unit that doesn't particularly need a Mark of Chaos, then Ulaka the Black is really spicy as well. I've been playing around with, the whole bulk Legionnaire spam. I'm like, okay, well, who's going to be my damage dealers? Because you can't just prioritize objective markers. You need to be like, okay, cool, I'm going to do objective markers and something else. So, I need to be able to do damage as well. So what I'm toying around with is a Lord Discordant who has the Flames of Spite and Ulaka the Black. And that guy is just absolutely gangster. He goes in with 14 attacks, and he's going to be hitting on 2s, and then he's going to be wounding on most things on 3s with rerolls, and every successful wound does a mortal wound in addition, and every 6 to wound does another mortal wound in addition. This guy shits out a metric cunt ton of mortal wounds, and he's a huge problem solver, because he gets through Terminators like it's nobody's business, because his ability to wound them, he rolls a 6 to wound, and it's just cool, here's 2 mortal wounds, 2 mortal wounds, 2 mortal wounds. And because he gets that reroll wounds, you could theoretically, and you often would, reroll everything that's not a 6. Just go, cool, I'm just going to fish for 6s, and just generate an absolute ton of wounds. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I do really like that. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more Chaos Space Marine characters hidden amongst legionaries, because Chaos Space Marine characters are amazing damage dealers, and our secondary, which is the kill things with characters, got slightly better as well, because you can now do it from range. So if you have 3 Lord Discordants in your army, your ability to go, cool, well, I'm actually going to position myself in such a way that all 3 of them or a couple of them can see a character. Or, maybe your opponent's got a knight character or something like that, or a character that is targetable, and yours going to be like, okay, cool, well, I'm just going to, shoot that guy dead and score victory points. So, Yeah, I think you're on the money there, and some of your suggestions are also really, really obvious, powerful, strong Chaos Space Marine characters. So I think that's a really cool sort of archetype. I think Alpha Legion potentially do the Legionaries the best, just because of the sheer jank, the sheer tricks that they're able to pull off with those Legionaries. Like for example, oh, your opponent goes, cool, I've got these Plasma Inceptors are going to drop down here and shoot this guy that's back here somewhere. And you just go, cool, well, I'm going to use a strat to make it so you can't drop within 12 inches of these two units of Legionaries that are at the front. And that means they can't drop close, which means they have to drop further back, which means they don't have the range to hit the things in your backfield, which means those Plasma Inceptors are useless. Or even better, if they're using like Blood Angels or something like that that's going for deep strike charges, it's like, yep, nah. I don't care if you've got a chaplain nearby for +2 to your charges, you actually can't drop within 12 inches of me, which means I'm not an eligible target of a charge. So that's really good. And they got a whole ton of them, a whole ton of things. They can also mess with your opponent in all kinds of ways. So I'm a huge fan of the Alpha Legionaries. All right, we've got Aspect Noctis. Sorry, I've got my laptop screen on a desk back there behind the camera, and it's a bit too far away. It's sort of hard for me to read the comments amazingly. So apologies if I mispronounce or misread somebody's comment. Cool. Hi Dean, love your chaos content. I'm a Night Lords player, wondering if in Arcs of Omen you had any thoughts to update your masterclass / key units. Yes. So what I'm working on at the moment, I'm trying to produce. It's actually really interesting, and maybe this is a separate topic. I'll answer your question first, and then I'll get into this in more detail. But I'm trying to sort of reimagine the way that I do this content, and try to do something with a little bit more quality and a little bit more substance. So currently, what I largely do is just kind of opinion pieces, more or less, which are clearly being received quite well, and I very much appreciate the feedback that I get. But I want to do more. I want to do more for you guys. And one of the things that I would like to do is do a video with what Arcs of Omen means for each legion. So I didn't quite get to all of the legions for the masterclass. I didn't end up doing one for Black Legion. Didn't end up doing one for Iron Warriors. I think I got the rest of them though. So I might just smash out those last two relatively fast, or maybe they'll be the first two that I'll hit in this new series of videos. But what I want to do is go, cool, what does Arcs of Omen mean for Night Lords players? And really break that down in detail. Which units gained power, which units lost relevance, what is the meta going to look like, and how do we pair into it, what do we do about that? Really talk about it for each legion, because obviously the secondaries changed. Even, for example, with Night Lords, because behind enemy lines changed, Night Lords actually gained way more relevancy because they're really good at scoring behind enemy lines because they can turn one deep strike. So you could take, a unit that's going to fit in a little pocket in your opponent's backfield, and they're probably not going to screen you out because most people assume you can't drop on turn one. So you can just go, cool, up turn one, and I'm just going to deep strike that behind enemy lines, get 3 victory points there straight away. Really, really powerful. So, Night Lords I think are really good, and also in a meta that's full of Marines, if that's the meta that does come to fruition, Night Lords have a lot of really good tricks for killing Marines. Like there's that little Master of Executions guy. You can take him with that pistol where basically you use 6s to hit, do mortal wounds. So you can go, cool, well, I'm going to use make him Marcus Lanesh and make sure that I automatically roll a 6 to hit, do those mortal wounds. Then I'm going to go into combat, and again, hitting on 6s, doing mortal wounds. He's just an absolute blender. He'll go into a unit of Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators and just clean them up. So I think Night Lords have quite a few opportunities for some real power. But so what I'd really like to do is just sit there and go through legion by legion, the same way I was with the masterclass videos, and just talk about all of these changes and sort of try to provide, some advice and some ideas on, the way that it's going to work. But unfortunately, I work 45 hours a week in a warehouse, so time is my greatest enemy. Because, got to pay the bills. So, you know, and a lot of this stuff is really expensive. Like even just the what do you call it, subscriptions for the programs that I use for all my editing and stuff, like all of this sort of stuff. Like I've got a Dropbox which I use for storing all of the content so that I can transfer it from device to device and all that sort of stuff. And that Dropbox is fucking expensive because I need a huge amount of storage for the video files and stuff. So all of these things are really expensive. And then on top of that, you know, the cost of living is going up pretty regularly. So trying to, you know, juggle all of that plus commitments with family and whatnot. So I'm kind of at a stage where I just can't afford to reduce my workload. Whereas if I was getting more, like as this channel is going to continue to grow, and I'm confident that it will, then I'll hopefully be able to tell my boss that I want to drop back to working 4 days a week instead of 5. And that'll give me an extra day. And in that day, I'll treat it like a work day, and I'll get up at 6 a.m. and I'll get straight into the studio and I'll record some stuff. And then throughout the week, I'll do my research and whatever. And hopefully when I reach that sort of level, I'll be able to give you guys videos at the same frequency that I'm currently doing, but with a little bit more substance and a little bit more, you know, quality, you know, details and stuff like that. Because, you know, nothing triggers me more than when I get something wrong in a battle report or something like that, or in a video, and it's something that I got wrong, and I noticed that I got it wrong during editing. Because often I'll just say things and I'll be talking off the top of my head, and then as I'm editing, I'll be like, that doesn't actually work, you know. But it's like the time that if I was to then go back and edit it again and remove that and re-record that segment, I'd only be able to do like one video every 2 weeks, you know, because it would just take so long. So I kind of don't have that option at the moment. And at the same time, I kind of like it because it kind of shows you the real inner workings. Like this is even the top players that are achieving those high rankings. We go through a process of making mistake after mistake after mistake before we get it right. So I hope that provides you guys with a bit of inspiration that it's okay when you get things wrong, because we all get things wrong like all the time. But yeah, I would really like to reach a point with this channel where I'm able to dedicate more time to it and do the the content on an equally regular basis, but put a little bit more time into the research, a little bit more time into the editing, just to make sure that I cross my T's and dot my I's and give you guys the best content that I can. It's just one of those classic balancing acts, I guess, between the various sort of forces at play. Because I could hypothetically just drop back to doing one video every 2 weeks, and then make sure that video is amazing. And there's a lot of people that do sort of recommend that. They basically say, you know, it's better to produce one really good video than 10 average videos. And I completely agree with that. And the reason that I've gone for the more frequent releases is because every video that I release, I learn something new about the way that the programs work, about the way that my equipment works, and I get a little bit better every time. So for my own personal growth, I would rather put out 10 average videos, because that's what's going to facilitate me putting out that 11th video that's amazing. Whereas if I try too hard to make sure every video is amazing, I'm probably still going to mess things up and not put out amazing content. But on top of that, I won't be learning the lessons as rapidly, you know. It's kind of like evolution, right? Evolution goes on generation at a time. So if you can increase the frequency in which generations happen, you can increase the frequency in which evolution takes place, which is like why we're able to see like a virus, for example, evolves way faster than humanity does. And that's because a virus has generation after generation after generation after generation within a couple of days, whereas humans, is like a generation is fucking 20, 30 years. So yeah, trying to increase the frequency of my videos facilitates that rapid evolution of my skills and my, you know, essentially the quality of my content, which is ultimately, that's what I care about, is the quality of the content that I'm putting out there. So yeah, I hope that answers your question about whether or not we're going to be receiving any updates to the the masterclass videos, and absolutely we will. The other challenging thing is, I guess, a lot of what I do is I'll record in one day, I'll record like 3 or 4 videos, and then basically I'll edit the first one, release it, and then over the next 2 days, I'll edit the next one and then release it, and then edit the next one and then release it, so on and so forth. And then after that week has elapsed, I'll then go, cool, now it's the weekend, I'll record another 3 or 4 videos. And that's sort of how I do it behind the scenes. But the challenge with that method is if something changes during the week, or there's a new realization, or there's, a new rumor or leak comes out that I want to discuss, it can be really hard to sort of adapt and move with pace on those situations. So I don't know. It's sort of hard. I don't know how the best way to approach this is going to be. Cool. So yeah, thanks again for your comment. Let me just see if there's any other supers in there. Doesn't look like it. So we can keep going with the regular contents. Have I ever used the Exalted Champion? He looks fun though, equipment locked. Exalted Champion, I've written a couple of lists that had him in there. Primarily they are situations where it's World Eaters generally, because World Eaters characters are somewhat limited because you can't take the Sorcerer, you can't take the Master of Possessions, etc. But I think he's kind of just bad, right? Like he gives reroll 1s to wound, which is fine, but I generally find that it's not wounding the enemy that's the problem. We deal with plenty of, especially when you've got the option to instead have Abaddon to get reroll everything to wound. And he's a bit too expensive to be in the list to buff just like 1 or 2 units. Like he needs, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of the Exalted Champion, unfortunately. And like if your goal is to just make like a beat stick character, there's so many better options. There's so many better, candidates for that beat stick role that I think the what's he called? The Exalted Champion is just kind of awkward. And unfortunately, I don't really think he has much play at all. Unfortunately, with the Arcs of Omen release, the Helldrake is the flyer who has been put away forever in competitive. How would you fix the Drakes to be playable ever again? So I have an interesting relationship with Helldrakes because when I sort of early days, when I was getting more and more into the competitive stuff, Helldrakes were actually OP as fuck. So I don't know how many of you remember back in 7th edition and 6th edition, but there was one point where flyers could only ever be hit on a 6. You could only ever hit them on a 6. So it was way more powerful than the old neg 1 to hit mechanic that we have at the moment, right? So that made them really, really strong and hard to hit. And then what they had is they had a Flamer, which had the Flamer template, and then theirs was different though. Normally, just say this is the cunt with a Flamer. I'll do it down here. So say this is the cunt with Flamer. Normally you'd have to put the Flamer touching his base and aim it wherever you wanted to aim the Flamer. Whereas Helldrakes, you could draw a line, I think it was 12 inches away from the Helldrake, and then treat that spot as if that's where the Helldrake was, and then you could aim the Flamer from there, which meant you were always getting perfect angles on things, and you were flaming the absolute fuck out of stuff. So the Helldrake was, at one stage, an auto-include. Most people were bringing 2, sometimes even 3, and they were really, really powerful. So I got a Helldrake early on, and it's one of the things that sort of pushed me into that competitive tournament success, because it was carrying me, because I was relatively new, didn't know a massive amount of what I was doing, but I just knew that Helldrake fucked things up. So I really loved the Helldrake, but pretty much ever since then, every edition has just taken big chunks out of the Helldrake in terms of its effectiveness and viability competitively, and as a result, it's just not there. It's just not doing the work. And especially now, like you said, with the Arcs of Omen, they've just the final nail in the coffin for the Helldrake. Like, you put that thing on the shelf and you don't bring it out until 10th edition. Like I don't really see a mechanism for them changing it. What would I do to change it? So you'd have to change the rule set completely, essentially. I personally don't even think flyers really belong in the game, because it's in the same way that I don't necessarily think knights do either. I think the scale is not right. Like if you think about it, a Helldrake is going to be like the model stands yay high off the table, but in reality, the Helldrake's going to be fucking way up there. You know, like why the fuck is a Valkyrie gunship flying so low? Shouldn't it just be blah? Like I don't know. And how is it that they're able to be hit and it's only neg 1 to hit? It's like it's fucking way up there. Your bolters just shouldn't be able to hit it at all. You know, like you look at any military craft, and often the reason that they fly with the heights that they do is because bullets actually can't go that high. You know, so even if they line up a perfect shot and shoot at you, the bullet just it doesn't have the guts to go that high. So in 40k, I know it's not that, it's hard to expect it to be this realistic, and realistic doesn't necessarily translate to fun on the tabletop. But I just think that the flies are a problem for the game, and I never really liked the concept of them, having flyers in the game. So I guess the way that I would fix them is to try to make them feel a little bit more realistic, like strafing runs and things like that. Like I've never understood why the flyer is just here and then next turn it's like there, and it's like, but what is it like? How is it not bombing and stuff? So I don't know. It's a really tricky question on how I would make Helldrakes work. I guess you kind of have to just abandon the idea of having it make sense. You know, you have to go, cool, it doesn't make sense, but how can we make it fun? How can we make flyers just fun to play? So I think the movement arcs is kind of cool. I think making them really hard to hit is kind of cool. I would probably go a little bit further. I'd go back to being only able to hit them on 6s, but I would make it so that their shots are maybe less accurate as well, and dial up their points costs to reflect the fact that they're really hard to hit, and then just make it so that like what we've got now, where they can't hold objectives or anything like that. So it's like, cool, if you want to bring a flyer into your list, it's a really good way of bringing really durable, effective damage, but it's really expensive and it doesn't contribute to you winning the game. So flyers become really, really, tricky like that. I guess that's the way I would approach it, which sort of does bring us back into that old 7th and 6th edition mindset and the way that the flyers work there. There was one period there, and I'm not sure if anyone remembers this, we've almost got like collective amnesia on this because it was so traumatic. They brought out, I think it was called Fire in the Skies or something, or Death in the Skies. There was a supplement book basically, and it came out and it was official match play rules. So this was expected by GW to be adopted by everyone. And what it was essentially, if you brought flyers in your list, you didn't actually play with the flyers. This was actually really, really cool. It just was hard to implement. You didn't play with the flyers. They weren't in your army. They weren't on the tabletop. If you had flyers in reserves, your opponent got like negative to their reserve rolls, because you used to have to roll to see if a unit could come on from reserves. So the flyers would disrupt your opponent's ability to bring on their reinforcements, which was kind of cool. And then you also had a dogfight, which was a separate phase of the game where you would basically take your flyers and any flyers your opponent had and have a little strategic dogfight on the table, on like a separate table, and then that would have certain impacts on the bigger game. So this was all really, really cool and really fun, but it was not able to be implemented on a tournament level, obviously, because you'd need a separate table for every second table that people bring flyers on. And it just sort of made things a bit more tricky. But I think that was GW's attempt at going, okay, we get it, flyers don't really work, they don't make much sense, let's try something different. So I applaud them for that. I think they did a passable job. It's just a bit of an oversight in that they probably didn't realize how the tournament circuit worked at the time, because GW's only sort of recently started paying attention to that sort of shit. So they just didn't really grasp the fact that tiers are not going to set up an extra table for every player. That's just not going to happen. And as a result, the supplement was largely just banned by tournaments. They just basically said, nah, let's just pretend that this supplement doesn't exist. So you can still run your flyers in your list as per normal, and you basically just still played your normal game of 40k. So yeah, that was an interesting time to be alive with the flyers. But I'm glad we don't have to deal with that shit anymore. Alright, what else have we got here? There's quite a few comments in here. I don't want to miss anything, so don't forget, if you want to make sure your comment is read, the super chat, chuck us a buck and I'll make sure your comment gets read. I love the Helldrakes having to start off the board now. It really leaves a hole in my army. Well, there is something to be said for the fact that yes, you have to start off the board, but also you can start off the board and it costs you nothing. You know, whereas previously, if you wanted to start off the board, that was going to cost you command points. So something like Helldrake's a bad example because they were already a bad unit. But if you take something like a Storm Raven or one of the gunships, something that comes on and does massive amounts of damage, being able to start that in strategic reserves for free is actually pretty good. And then you can deep strike it on, and it gets to shoot all of its guns before your opponent gets an opportunity to attack you. You know, that's pretty spicy. That does, pretty good work. So it's hard to argue that that's not a bit of a buff, because there's nothing worse than when your opponent goes first and they go, cool, your flyer's got really long distance, so therefore it's a high threat because it can get angles on me and shit, so I'm just going to blow that up first. And you're like, aww. I would have liked to have seen, perhaps with flyers, like, yes, they have to start in strategic reserves, but in their first turn, they can make a normal move from your table edge. So instead of deep striking in, they actually just get to move onto the table. And that way you can still go, cool, my flyer's going to come out of nowhere and blast you, which is what flyers would do in real life. You'd be chilling, you're having a gunfight in the trenches, and then just all of a sudden, a jet just flies over the top, and you can't react to that. You don't have time to react to that. So that would be actually a really cool way of making flyers feel a little bit more, realistic, whilst having a fun mechanic in the game that's unique to the flyers. Yeah, I like that. That's my final answer. I know I waffled around a little bit there, but sometimes that's what you got to do before you can come up with a response you're happy with, and I really like that. So have flyers start in strat reserves. They must start in the strat reserves, but when they do come on, they can do a normal move from from your long table edge, as long as they don't end that. Maybe as long as they don't end that move within 9 inches of enemy models or something like that. So you've still got that sort of restriction, so a flyer can't just go zoop and charge into things and blow things up and do all this crazy shit. But it's a little bit more flexible in that they can, come on and do what they want to do. Something like that could be fun. Okay, hear me out. Black Legion Warpsmith, Thunderhammer, Flames of Spite, Sightless Helmet. How much of a meme in this? I love a good meme unit. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of just going, what's this really silly combo? Meme units, and they're always so much fun to see the look on your opponent's face when you actually get to do the combo, and everything lines up, which is rare, and that's why you don't really see meme lists played at the top tables, because they're generally bad. But yeah, I like that idea. I like that. It's cool. It's very cool. I'm just going to grab another quick ad break while I grab myself a drink.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
And we are back. Got myself a nice full bottle of drink, so it should be a while before I have to subject you to my advertising again. But speaking of that advertising, that ad, that was my wife. It was me and her cooking that up together, and I don't think I've ever had so much fun making a video. It was so much fun. Just the joking and the laughing while we were writing the script. The recording of it took several takes because we just kept breaking out in laughter. It was really, really good fun. And we're talking about some ideas for other parody style ads that we could do for the future. So other things that we could meme on, other sort of comedy style things, because I don't know about you guys, but I think that if you can make an ad that makes somebody laugh, not only is it a much more effective ad, and therefore you're much more likely to get the subscribers or sell your product or whatever, but also it's just a double-edged sword because it's good content. It's entertaining content, which is what I'm in the business of. I'm trying to be a content creator, so being able to just go, cool, well, I'm making entertaining content that also happens to double as an ad. I think that's that sweet spot that you want to be in. So yeah, that was so much fun to make, and yeah, we filmed multiple versions of it, which is a lot of fun as well. All right, I've just seen a comment that says this with up arrows, so I'm going to read the comment above it, see what people have to say. Oh, that's really funny. That's the comment I just read. Lol, it was one about the Helldrakes and how I would go about making them playable. So I guess I got two people with that one. What else we got in here? Given the points changes, is anything more cost effective than 5 legionaries with a heavy weapon, geared up? What's that word? Fuck. Geared up aspiring champ seems to be cost/value efficient versus other options. Yes and no. So it's actually quite interesting. I was looking at my list. I started from the assumption that I was just going to take 12 units of 5 legionaries, and that was 90 points per unit, and that's fully kitted, right? And I'm like, if I just don't give them any other upgrades, because why not? Like, why would you? I'm not going to give them marks of chaos or anything like that if I don't need to. And then I'll write the rest of the list around it, and then whatever points I have left over, I'll then drop upgrades in wherever I can. So that was sort of the approach that I took. And then I wrote it and I was like, well, hang on, if Alpha Legion, for example, I was planning on going for behind enemy lines. If my plan is to just bring units on from the table edges, it's going to be quite hard because turns 1 I can't come on. Turn 2 I can't come on in their deployment zone. Turn 3 is when I can come on, but then turns 4 and 5, I can only bring on 1 unit by using the Alpha Legion, put them back into strat reserves and bring it back on again stratagem. So I was like, well, it's actually kind of hard to do that. So I was like, well, what are my other options? I was like, well, actually, the single unit of Obliterator is actually 90 points as well, a unit of just 1 Obliterator, and it will be able to deep strike turn 2 in my opponent's deployment zone, and it's really hard to screen out because it's a relatively small base and there's only 1 model in the unit. So I was like, actually, I'm going to drop a couple of my legionary squads and put in a couple of units of Obliterators so that I can more easily secure behind enemy lines. And also, those obliterators bring something to the table that the legionaries don't, and that is that gun at range is actually quite good, and they punch quite good. So they perform a very similar role to the legionaries, and they're a bit of an all-comer. They do melee damage, they do shooting damage, they are deep striking, they're doing maneuvers, but they're just doing it slightly differently. And having multiple things that do things differently is one of the keys to success. You want to make sure that your list has the ability to function in different ways so that you can bring those tools to bear in the situations that require them. So I ended up putting 3 units of 1 obliterator in the list, which I'm actually kind of nervous because I haven't had an opportunity to try out this list because I haven't even finished building and painting it yet. So I haven't had an opportunity to try it out. List submission for the event is this weekend, and I'm at a tournament this weekend. So, I don't know when I'm supposed to fucking test this list. And the event that I'm going to next weekend, that I'm writing this list for, is the Australian ITC Championships, which is an 8-round event. So I really don't want to be taking an untested list into an 8-round event. I really would like to ideally get 3 or 4 games in with the list before I submit the list. So my current plan is basically to spend all of Sunday playing with this list. I've got a mate who's going to come over, and we're just going to play 3 or 4 games in a day. We might not play the games to completion. We'll just play the first couple of turns for each, into each different opponent, and just see do the legionaries actually work? Do they kill enough? Do they do enough damage? Do they survive long enough? All of these questions have to be answered before I can comfortably submit the list. I don't know why I got stuck on that particular word there, but it is what it is. So yeah, hopefully I can get that done, because it's just nerve-wracking not knowing what list I'm going to bring to this event that we've been building up to all year. I'm actually quite disappointed that the TOs decided to use Arcs of Omen. I understand that they had a set rules cutoff. They had a plan. This is when rule cutoff will be, and these rules came out before that cutoff, so it checks out, makes perfect sense that they would go, okay, well that means we're using these rules. However, I think they should have made an exception here, and they should have gone, you know what, this is the championships event for the 2022 season, so it only makes sense to use the same rules, the same mission pack that you used for the duration of that season. It doesn't make sense to, imagine if you're, watching the football, and then just the day before the Super Bowl, they fucking decide, we're going to use 2 footballs now, and for the next season. And also we're going to use it for the fucking Super Bowl, or the grand final, or whatever. That makes zero fucking sense that you would make that change mid-season. It's not even mid-season. Literally just before the finals. That makes no sense. So yeah, I find that quite disappointing. They should have, in my opinion, just gone, cool, we know that the Arcs of Omen's out. We know you're all very excited for Arcs of Omen. We are too. However, this event is trying to be the championship for the country for this season of competitive 40k, and as a result, we want to honour the people who've spent the time practicing, developing, refining their list over this season, and we're going to give them an opportunity to play that list that they've been refining at the season finale. I think that's reasonable, and I don't think they would have got much pushback for that, but I think they also kind of just wanted to be the first big event to run the Arcs of Omen, so that they get that publicity. That's another element of it. And I guess you can't blame them. They're trying to run a business, so you got to let them do what they want to do when it comes to that. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't provide them with the feedback. I'm planning to sit down with the TOs, maybe even get them on this channel for an interview, and just have a chat about why they made that decision, what they thought about it, and then just some general stuff about running Australia's largest event, some plans for the future, that sort of stuff. I feel like that could be an interesting conversation. So we'll see if they are keen to give that a go. I'm pretty good mates with the TOs. I've known them for many, many years now. So it shouldn't be that hard to strike up a conversation for this channel. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about conversations with things like TOs. I know there's a lot of value, I think, in having conversations with tournament winning players. Like those players that go in and they crush the tournaments and they get those big wins. You want to hear from them, you want to know how they did it, you want to get advice from them, you want to sort of listen to the way they think so that you can get a bit of an understanding on like what decisions led them towards certain things and how they conceptualize things. I find a lot of value in that. But I want to know whether you guys think there's much value in listening to a TO talk about running an event and that sort of stuff. I've TO'd a whole ton of events myself, so can definitely have a lot of good conversations with other TOs. If that's something that you're interested in, like if it's not, if you're like, yeah, cool, who cares? TOs are just there to run the event. I want to talk to the guy who's winning it. Then hell yeah. And yeah, just also if you think that there's sort of space, or if you're interested in just more podcast style content where it's like, conversations, instead of trying to do, pretty much everything through the lens of, tactics, strategy, analysis, that sort of stuff. Because, I'm not necessarily the most socially competent guy. I'm kind of socially awkward in a lot of situations. But, I'm more than happy to strike up conversations with other TOs and talk about the hustle. So yeah, let me know what you think of that in the comments. Oh, what do we got in here? What kind of demon engine would you like to see? Hellstalker without Disco Lord, ? So, I assume you mean for like a World Eaters release, if they got their own unique demon engine, like how the Death Guard do. If I was to make a prediction, I would guess that we would get a Tower of Skulls. And I say this because, like, you look at what GW have been doing lately, and you can tell that there's somebody that works there that has a hard-on for the old art. Like, you look at even the Terminator Lord for World Eaters, that was the Warhammer Plus exclusive, taken directly from the artwork. There's tons of things. There was that Sisters of Battle Canoness taken directly from the old artwork. There's tons of that sort of stuff. And even you look at Votan, and it's like they got the Land Fortress from the artwork. They got quad bikes, the trikes. Not quad bikes, the trikes. Again, directly from the artwork. So you can see that GW have definitely got somebody there that's making these decisions, that is trying to bring 40k back to their childhood, like trying to bring those things back. And as a result, if I had to make a prediction on what kind of demon engine we would get, it would be a Tower of Skulls, which may be a modification on the Lord of Skulls kit. So maybe you have the Lord of Skulls was the one with the torso and the melee weapons, and he's the punchy guy. And then the Tower of Skulls was a similar sort of thing, but it's like a cathedral top cannon, skull cannons and shit like that. That could be really cool. I actually think we've kind of got enough demon engines. I know this is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think World Eaters really needed a demon engine. Like, we've already got the Blood Slaughterer. We've already got all the Decimators and things like that. Like, Forge World have a pretty good range of demon engines. And then on top of that, you've got the Mauler Fiend, you've got the Forge Fiend, you've got the Venom Crawler. I know the Venom Crawler didn't make it into the Codex, which is fucking weird to me, but we've already got lots of different demon engines. So I don't necessarily think we needed a new demon engine. I would have much rather to see new troops. So, and by troops I mean infantry. So, or even not necessarily infantry. So things like Juggernaut cavalry, things like that, where it's more making it more of an elite army, as opposed to like, I'd leave the demon engines for an Iron Warriors release, I want to see really hardcore mortals fused with demons, savage combat, that sort of stuff. So I really like the 8-bound. They're very, very cool models. And they fit perfectly with what I was hoping for. But I would like to see, obviously, the Red Butchers, they need to make that a thing. I think the fact that they didn't make them a unit is just borderline unacceptable. Even if they just called the World Eaters Terminators Red Butchers and didn't bring them in, give them a new unit, just do that, you know. But I still think they should have given us our own unique Terminators, and I think they should have made it a dual kit that does 2 different types of Terminators, similar to how the Death Guard have like the Blight Lords and the whatever the other ones are called, Death Shrouds. You know, make them a dual kit. I would have made the Berserkers a dual kit as well, and I would have had Berserkers and Rampagers. And Berserkers would be your bolt pistol chainsaw guys or chain axe guys, standard troops unit, that sort of deal. And then your Rampagers would have like the Meteor Hammers, the, you know, dual chain axes, the big chain glaives, just a pure melee unit, which would be an elite slot, and that would give you a bit of diversity. It would be, if you want something that's a little bit more expensive, does more damage, but doesn't have objectives secured, go for them. If you want something that's more about controlling objectives and doing these things, take the Berserkers. That would have been cool. And then, yeah, have the Juggernaut unit as one as well. And then, yeah, I probably wouldn't have done a Demon Engine. Maybe you take like the Blood Slaughterer and make a plastic kit. That could be cool. But I don't think they needed to really reinvent the wheel with this one. They could have just, you know, ticked a couple more boxes than they did, and that would have been plenty to keep most people happy. Okay, on the Demon Engines question, if each Legion could have one new Demon Engine, what would you like to see for each Legion? Tower of Skulls for World Eaters is a good call. Okay, that's a fucking sick question. That's an amazing question. Thank you very much. Jorge, I believe. So what Demon Engines would I like to see for each Legion? Well, let's start with the really easy ones. Emperor's Children would need some kind of Sonic-based Demon Engine. Maybe some kind of like tormented sort of almost like a Sisters of Battle Exorcist, or the one with the organs on the back, something like that, but you know, with demonic legs or something like that, like something real fucked up. Some real nightmare fuel would be really cool. Alpha Legion, you'd probably want some kind of phantomish kind of demon engine. What would Alpha Legion want? Some shape-shifting thing. I don't know. That's an interesting one. You know, Alpha Legion, they probably like a serpent. They would have a fucking serpent. They would have some kind of tunneling serpent-style demon engine, a Hydra demon engine that's got fucking 3 heads coming off of it, and it tunnels, it deep strikes, and maybe it pops up and does mortal wounds to things. That would be fucking sick. So so you got a Sonic, some kind of Sonic fucking orchestra demon engine for Emperor's Children. We've got some kind of Hydra thing for the Alpha Legion. Who's next? Red Corsairs. So for me, I see Red Corsairs as kind of like your pirates, your raiders. So maybe what they would have is almost like some kind of looted vehicle, where it's like they've taken some kind of imperial vehicle and they've enhanced it with demons or something to that effect. So I don't know, maybe like maybe a transport. Imagine a demon engine that's also a transport. That could be kind of cool. Something like that. Let's see, what other legions? What's next? We've got the Iron Warriors. I think there's pretty self-explanatory. It would be some kind of siege warfare based demon engine. Maybe something with really big claws that can rip open doors, or something that's got, you know, barrage weapons that blast from long range. Or maybe like some kind of like a battering ram, where it's like it goes into combat and does massive damage like that. That could be kind of cool. something to that effect. What's the next legion? You got Black Legion. They would probably just end up having something generic, like some kind of defiler. It's sort of hard. And this is one of the reasons why Black Legion is one of my least favorite legions, because it's like there's nothing unique about them. The unique thing about them is that they're kind of just everyone. You know, they're your vanilla guys. So it's sort of hard to be like, well, what's something cool that's very Black Legion-y? Because they don't really have much of a theme that they sort of go on. So that's a tricky one, Black Legion. I think one of the coolest demon engines, or the coolest legion to try to design a demon engine for, would be Creations of Bile. Imagine something where it's like one of the best things about 40k for me is the demon engines, because it's like, this is a super genetically enhanced super soldier space marine wearing crazy amounts of armor that's also possessed by demons. Like a Helldrake is a fucking dragon demon super soldier robot. What the fuck? Like, that's so 40k. It's just like everything, right? But Creations of Bile could do that one step further, and that is that they could add alien to the mix. So imagine like a Dark Eldar Talos that's been captured and worked on by a combination of Creations of Bile surgeons and warp smiths, and they've created this hybrid demon monster, you know. That could be really cool. Or maybe like, you know, some kind of genetically enhanced version of an obliterator or something like that, where it's like, yeah, obliterators are cool, but Creations of Bile, like the Fabius Bile, creates really crazy ones, you know. Maybe bring back the Mutilator. So yeah, that could be cool. This is really fun. What else could there be? What other legions are there? What have I missed? Have I missed one? Night Lords. I did Night Lords, didn't I? That have some kind of fear-based, you know, bat style, maybe like Helldrake style, but smaller. Maybe like a, you know, a mini flyer that's, you know, not actually an aircraft, but it's just like a little flyer, a little, you know, fly keyword, jump pack style dreadnought kind of profile that just flies up the board and fucks shit up in combat and has big aura debuffs. And then yeah, World Eaters would be probably the Tower of Skulls, because we know about that in the lore. And yeah, that answers that question. That was a sick question. I wish there was a way for me to give you a super chat. Alright. What do we got here? Given the points changes, no, I've read that one so far. Where are we up to? I've lost where I'm up to. Which legion do I think is the strongest? Word Bearers or Emperor's Children? I'd probably say Emperor's Children at the moment. Just purely because the Noise Marines are really, really good and they become troops for the Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children also, ignoring hit modifiers is really good, because you're hitting on 2s without any modifiers. That's just as good as rerolls, no matter what you're hitting on. You know, like, I think more often than not, I'd be just as happy to hit on 2s than have anything with a reroll. So they kind of do everything that the Emperor's Children do plus more. That the Word Bearers do plus more. And now that they both have really good secondaries, previously I would have said that the Word Bearers had it because they had a better secondary. But now that the Emperor's Children have one of the best secondaries, I actually think they take the cake. I think the Emperor's Children are quite possibly the strongest legion we have at the moment. And I'm seriously considering them Emperor's Children Legionary spam with some Sonic Blasters and Noise Marines in the mix as well. I think that's going to be my list for the championships. because I don't think you get much better than that. So yeah, good question, but I hope that answers it in detail. Because I mean, the word bearers are still very, very good. Don't get me wrong; they're very, very powerful. They have a good secondary. They have good legion trait. They have some of the best relics and warlord traits. You know, they can make some of the most powerful beatstick characters. So there's definitely lots and lots of reasons that you would want to choose either of them. And this is why ultimately, like, if you're looking to start a new Chaos Space Marine army, or maybe you've got a very small collection and you're looking to grow to a point where you could take it to tournaments and play, my advice is always pick a color scheme that isn't already allocated to one of the legions. So, for example, my general Chaos Space Marines are painted with a bone-colored armor and golden trim, right? Bone and gold, because that's not an existing legion, which means I can say, oh, this is a Black Legion warband, and they've painted their armor bone color to, you know, for whatever reason, and everyone's like, oh yeah, cool, and I'm like, yep, so I'm using Black Legion rules, and then if Black Legion get a huge nerf, well then it's like, okay, cool, they're now actually Iron Warriors, and that's fine, or you know, there's tons of ways that you can use a generic paint scheme to justify running your army as whatever you want. Gold trim is a really good idea too, because a lot of the legions have gold trim. So if you change your base color to be something that's not gold trim, then you can be like, you can see how they would tie into Iron Warriors because they've got the gold trim like Iron Warriors do. They've just replaced the steel with bone. But then you could do the same with Black Legions. Like, oh, cool, they're still at the gold trim, but they've replaced the black with bone. Or World Leaders even, you know, they've just replaced the red with bone. And that just gives you way more flexibility when it comes to what army you want to play. You don't feel like you're trapped. Whereas if you paint them all as Night Lords, and then the new book comes out and the Night Lords suck, you're going to feel personally attacked. You're going to be like, this fucking sucks. My army just got nerfed. But if you don't tether your army to a specific legion, you can just fucking pivot and run whatever you want. So yeah, hope that answers that question. For Emperor's Children, a stage with legs, tormented sisters singing in the middle, scary sonic attacks. Yeah, that's fucking cool. Like a stage for a demon engine with some big fuck off speakers that have like demonic maw. Yeah, that'd be sick. That would be very, very cool. So yeah, some really good chats we're having in there, guys. I really enjoyed these comments. I need to work on this layout a little bit. I need to get that screen a little bit closer to me, or blow it up somehow, or you know, make it bigger so that I can read these comments without having to lean in and squint. It also doesn't help that I've got a stage light sitting right there, so when I get closer, it's like the light's right in my fucking eyes. So I'm working on sort of increasing the quality of this, working on ways to do it better. I want to try to have more or less one setup that I can use for all of the different types of video content, so I don't have to reposition everything every single time. So like currently I've got the camera mounted to the roof, it comes down, and that allows me to go, cool, I can have the camera like this, but then I can also put a table up, set the table up behind me, and then play without having to move the camera, without having to move the lighting. I have the desk here for the laptop, so it's definitely getting there. It's just sort of ironing out those bits and pieces. Like, this is the first time I've done a live stream with this camera setup. The last time I had a slightly different setup. The last time I had the laptop right in front of me. But this time I was like, oh, well, I want the space to set up. I want to do the split screen. So this is the first time I've had, you know, camera there and camera down here. Which, let me know whether you guys find that valuable, being able to see the minis that I'm working on. Or whether you think it's just as easy to just, whoops, shit, I just dropped that guy. Oh, God. It's alright, he lives. But yeah, let me know if you find this camera down here valuable, because if not, I'll fuck it off and I'll do something different with the layout. I was toying with the idea of trying to get a camera mounted behind me here, looking down, so you can see kind of like a point of view camera from me on what I'm painting, but trying to figure out how the fuck am I going to get a camera that's mounted there. Really, really tricky. Especially because I want it to be, like I said, I want it to be mounted somewhere where I don't have to move it every time I film. So I want to be able to go, you know, finish dinner with the missus, come in here, and basically I want to be able to just hit record, sit down, do the live stream, do the tactics video, do the battle report, do the, you know, podcast, do whatever needs to be done. And I want to be able to just do all that without having to fuck around. I also need to get fucking new cords for this camera, because I think, like this, the camera that I'm using is actually a really high quality, good camera, but I think the cord that I'm using is really low quality, and as a result, if I record directly on the camera, I get really high quality video, but when I run the camera cord through the computer and record in OBS, I get less quality on the video side of things. So these are all just like things that I'm working on in the background, sort of to give you guys a little bit of an insight. So, you know, so I'm going to head down to the JB Hi-Fi on Sunday, and then, you know, and this is the sort of stuff that the Patreon support goes towards. So I'm going to put a couple $100 worth of cords. I'm also going to buy a new microphone that will mount directly to the computer and record without having to be wireless. I bought myself a really nice wireless microphone set, which is what we need for when we're doing battle reports, right? Because we need to be able to be moving around and recording while we're talking, but we don't want microphones following us around and shit. So I bought that for that purpose. But it's not ideal for this, you know, having a lapel mic, a little battery operated thing attached to me. It's not ideal for this format. So I'm hoping to get one that plugs directly into the camera or directly into the computer that will record the audio for me there. And then I'll just save these wireless ones for when we are doing a battle report. Will be the plan. But again, these things all cost money, so I can only really upgrade the channel at a certain pace. And I've just got to sort of do the best I can with what I've got. So I'm on my last legionary from this row. I've done 30 tonight, which is pretty good. And I've just been painting the silver on them, on all the chainswords and shit, as well as finishing off the flesh and then the bone. So I've done a fair bit of work, which is pretty good. But there's still another 40 to go. So I'll definitely be doing another one of these live streams soon, because I need to get the army done sooner rather than later, so that I can start practicing with it and whatnot. So definitely keep your eye out for that. It'll be coming up soon, but I'm going to more or less wrap it up now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish painting this guy. And I'm going to have a quick look through the comments, see if anything jumps out at me. And then if there is, I'll respond. If not, I'll wrap it up. So let's have a quick look-see at our comments section. So any tournaments in New South Wales in the next couple of months? No, I don't really have the luxury of being able to travel to New South Wales at the moment. Most of the events I get to go to are local ones. And to be honest, I'm not entirely in the loop when it comes to what's happening in New South Wales at the moment. The Risky Rollers guys have just announced they're doing 13 40k tournaments in Victoria this year. So I really want to show them support and just attend as many of their sort of events as I can. Stuff about New Titans. How, Dean, what do you think about different loadouts, marks, combats for legionnaires. So that I've got a video in the works for that right now. So talking about the fact that we now get free war gear, what is the best war gear to take and why. So I'm working on that video as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Should Chaos Space Marines have healer characters? Death Guard has Plague Surgeons, Slaughter Surgeons for World Eaters. I 100% agree. I think we should have an apothecary type unit. It shouldn't just be all about dealing damage. There should be something to do with the way that, the Legion, especially because the Legions, their rate of replenishment, the way they do replenishing their Legions in the lore is really tricky. So having somebody who's able to extract the gene seed and steal it off dead bodies is fucking really sick. So I agree, they should, 100%. But yeah, all right, cool. Well, that more or less catches up in the comments. Apologies to anybody if you put a comment in there that I missed. I do my best to try to read through as many as I can. However, as these streams grow more and more popular, I can just see that comment section is going to start filling up pretty fast. So if there is something that you want, all you have to do is put a $1 donation on there, and that flags it. It comes up at the top there saying somebody's done that, and I can click on it. It takes me directly to your comment, and I can read it. So if there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, that's the best way to do it, is just chuck a $1 in there and we'll take care of it that way. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. I really do appreciate you guys jumping in and joining me for this hobby session. And continue to put your comments in there after this goes live. You can comment after the fact, and I do read those comments as well, just so that I can get a bit of an understanding on, what you guys have been thinking, what you guys thought of the content, and sort of helps me guide the direction of this channel going forward. So yeah, thanks heaps, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, cheers.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.